Valerie Hayes checked the time on her phone and forced herself to breathe in for 4 counts, out for 6, the way she'd taught nervous clients to steady themselves before big meetings. The heat of a July afternoon pressed against the bank's tall glass windows, warping Peachtree Street into little waves of light. Inside, Prestige National Bank smelled faintly of printer toner and brewed coffee. A jazz standard floated from an unseen speaker. A ceiling fan moved the warm air in languid circles, not quite catching up to the crowd. Her appointment had been for 1. It was now nearly 2. In that span, she'd watched 4 customers, each of them white, 2 in golf shirts, 1 in a floral sundress, another in a seersucker blazer, step up to the receptionist and be whisked into offices. Some were greeted by first names and handshakes. One got a cup of water brought over without asking. The receptionist offered Valerie a tight smile at precisely 13-minute intervals, like an alarm she couldn't shut off. "Someone will be right with you, ma'am," she had said the last time, eyes flicking to the nameplate on the brass stand. "Appointments only." Valerie shifted on the leather chair and smoothed the lapel of her navy blazer. Same blazer she'd worn years ago when she stood in a courthouse and made her first closing argument, hands steady, voice even, while a partner half listened and checked his watch. She'd won that day. It wasn't fashion she was thinking about. It was ritual. She believed in rituals, the quiet ones that reminded you who you were despite how you were being treated. The bank's glass doors hissed open again. A couple in their 60s came in, the man tipping his cap to the guard stationed near the potted ficus. They joined the line for tellers. The counter was staffed by 3 young women in navy cardigans, one of whom kept stealing glances toward Valerie with a look that read both apology and warning. Her nameplate said Zara Johnson. When their eyes met, Zara gave a quick, almost imperceptible nod, the kind that said, "I see what's happening." "Mrs. Hayes?" A man with thinning sandy hair appeared in the doorway beside the reception desk. His tie was a little too bright for the suit, a cheerful red that didn't suit the flatness of his expression. He didn't step toward her. He motioned with a small jerk of his chin, as if calling a dog in from the yard. "We can see you now." She stood and offered her hand. "Ms. Hayes," she corrected pleasantly. "Valerie." He took her handshake for the briefest acceptable amount of time and then turned down a short hallway. "Thomas Pierce," he said over his shoulder, in a tone that landed like a minor inconvenience. "Loan officer." His office was small and neat, with certificates framed on the wall and a photo of a fishing boat at dawn. The blinds were angled so that the city became a pattern of pale stripes. His desk had 3 tidy stacks of files. He added her folder to the lowest of them without opening it. "So," he said, seating himself and glancing at his screen, "you're applying for a commercial line. Amount requested." The pause lingered just a fraction too long. "Substantial." "Correct," Valerie said. She handed over a slim binder. "This is the business plan. Financial projections for the next 5 years, letters of intent from 3 new clients, and the last 3 years of tax returns, business and personal." He drew the binder toward himself with 2 fingertips, like it might smudge. "And the purpose of the expansion is financial literacy and wealth-building services in underserved communities," he read, shaping the words as if they were foreign. "Is there really a market for that?" "There's an urgent need for it," Valerie said evenly. "And a market. We've piloted the workshop series in partnership with 2 nonprofits. The revenue model is detailed on page 12. Sliding scale fees balanced by corporate sponsorships. The margins are solid." Thomas flipped a single page, not to 12. He looked at the cover again. "And your firm, Hayes and Associates, generated $2 million last year?" He let the number hang as if it might topple under its own weight. "Legitimate income?" Valerie didn't let her smile reach her eyes. "All documented," she said. "Contracts with major clients are tabbed. Tax returns are signed. The numbers have been audited." He clicked his mouse twice, stared at the screen, and then, without looking up, asked, "And your address?" She told him. He made a sound in his throat she'd heard versions of all her life, something between a cough and a laugh, and typed. "That neighborhood is changing, isn't it?" he said, pushing a pen so that it rolled to the edge of the desk and stopped. "Just making sure what you've presented aligns with realities." "The reality," Valerie said, "is that my mortgage is paid on time, my credit score is 820, and my firm has been profitable for 12 consecutive years." She tapped her binder lightly. "It's all in there." He stared at her for the first time, really looked. His eyes moved from her gold studs to the neat bun, down to the binder, and back to her face. Then, like a magician building to a reveal, he sighed. "I think I should bring in my manager," he said. "He handles higher-profile applications." He didn't wait for her consent. He stood, took the binder with him, and left the door open. Valerie could see Zara at the teller line, counting 20s. The woman's mouth tightened when she glanced again toward the hallway. The room felt colder by a few degrees, though the air was the same. When the manager arrived, he filled the room with ease the way some men do, because they expect that the world will make space for them. "Robert Callahan," he said, voice carrying down the hall for anyone to hear. Gray at the temples, perfectly pressed suit. Watch that caught the light. He shook her hand, firm and brief, and then turned to Thomas before turning back to her, as if remembering manners in order, subordinate, then customer. "I understand there are some questions about the application," he said, smiling a measured, managerial smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We maintain certain standards for our commercial lending." "I've met them," Valerie said. She'd long ago trained her voice to be both warm and immovable. "All documents are provided, credit score, collateral, projections." "Your credit score seems unusually high," Callahan said, picking up a printout as though it were a plot twist he hadn't approved. He glanced at the first page, not reading. "For someone with your—" He searched for a word and landed on one he thought would sound neutral. "Background." Valerie lifted her chin. "My background is 20 years in financial analysis and law, 8 years running my own firm, and a habit of paying my bills on time." "Of course," he said quickly, palms out in a gesture that was supposed to telegraph reasonableness. "Of course. We simply need to verify. Fraud is, unfortunately, very common. Identity theft, fabricated documents, we've seen it all." He turned a page without looking down. "We'll need additional verification, incorporation documents, proof of education, property records." He let the list spool out, adding items he would not ask the seersucker blazer man for. "Why don't we involve your corporate compliance department now?" Valerie said, her voice gentle enough to be confused for a suggestion. "To make sure everything you're asking aligns with policy." Callahan's smile snapped a little tighter around the edges. "We can handle this at the branch level," he said. "Thomas, let's move to a more private setting." 2 uniformed security guards were suddenly, inexplicably at the doorway. Valerie rose, gathered her bag, and met their eyes. "No need to hover," she said, and stepped past them. If they heard her, they didn't show it. The conference room was at the end of the hall, small, windowless, bright, with the kind of fluorescent lighting that washed color out of faces. A camera bubbled in the corner. The air conditioner rattled. Callahan gestured to a chair that faced away from the door. Valerie chose the one that faced it. "We take fraud very seriously," he said, laying her binder on the table like a barrier. "There appear to be discrepancies." "What specific discrepancies?" Valerie asked. She set her phone on the table, screen down, and folded her hands so the tiny microphone concealed in her ring faced the room. He frowned, as if the specifics had run ahead of him. "Your income doesn't align with typical earnings for someone in your position," he said finally. "Your neighborhood doesn't match the profile we usually see with these numbers, and these projections here," he tapped randomly, "seem optimistic." "Income is supported by tax returns," Valerie replied. The neighborhood has a range of home values. Projections are based on contracts and sustained growth, all tabbed for you. He reached for the binder and then seemed to think better of it. We'll need to ensure this is all actually yours, he said. If you have other identification, a passport perhaps. She reached into her bag. One of the security guards shifted, hand moving reflexively. Callahan lifted a palm to calm him, but not before letting the moment breathe. Valerie placed her passport on the table alongside an old bar association card, its hologram catching the light. Callahan held the passport up to the fluorescent glare, squinting as though it might expose something. He looked from the photo to her face and back again like he was auditioning for a part in a procedural. He turned the bar card over and over. "This looks altered," he said finally, as if declaring the weather. "And your passport photo doesn't quite match your appearance." "People age," Valerie said pleasantly. "Lighting changes, hairstyles change, the holograms are real." The door opened and Zara appeared, holding a folder and wearing courage like a fragile coat. "Mr. Callahan," she began, voice steady, "I ran standard verification through check systems and early warning. Ms. Hayes' identity, business, and accounts confirm. Everything matches." For a heartbeat, silence. Callahan's smile fell from his face, as if something inside let go. "Ms. Johnson," he said, not unkindly, but with a coldness that ran under the words like a current. "You were not authorized to run those checks. Please return to your station. We'll discuss your initiative later." Zara's eyes flicked to Valerie's, an apology and a promise in one glance. She left without another word. The door clicked like a small gavel. "Where were we?" Callahan said, already back in motion. "Yes, given the inconsistencies, we're going to have to escalate. I'll contact our fraud liaison." He pulled a business card from his pocket, set it down so that the embossed seal winked. "We have a relationship with an agent who specializes in financial crimes. He's with the Bureau." He tapped the card with a manicured finger and began to dial a number on the speakerphone. Valerie could hear the air hum. The guard shifted again. She checked her watch, a tiny private smile moving across her mouth the way a cloud crosses sun, there and gone. "Officers," someone said at the door, and 2 Atlanta policemen slid into the room on a wash of starch and leather. The older one's hand hovered near his weapon. His partner looked everywhere but directly at Valerie. Callahan stepped into the hallway to greet them with a friendliness that seemed rehearsed. "Ma'am," the older officer said, voice clipped, "hands where we can see them." Valerie folded her hands on the table, palms down, ring glittering. "Of course." Callahan returned, a little flushed, eyebrows up in a performance of relief. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he told the officers, then pressed the speakerphone again. "Agent Wilson? Yes. We've got a live situation. Attempted bank fraud by an uncooperative subject, possible ring involvement. We'll need immediate response." He gave a quick summary into the air, punctuating phrases like uncooperative and suspicious with looks that weren't meant for Valerie so much as for the story he was building around her. He paced as he talked, occasionally glancing at her documents like they were props. The bank outside the glass wall kept moving, but the rhythm had changed. Tellers talked in quieter voices. A woman in a floral dress clutched her deposit slip and peered into the room. Someone's phone buzzed and was silenced with a guilty wince. Valerie could see the lobby reflected faintly in the glass, the guard at the ficus, the ceiling fan drawing slow circles, Zara's head bent over her till. Callahan ended the call and smoothed his tie. He turned to Valerie with the smile of a man who has rehearsed graceful endings for ugly scenes. "This is all quite simple," he said, spreading his hands. "If everything is in order, we'll verify and you'll be on your way. If not, well, we have protocols." "Protocols are important," Valerie agreed. She kept her voice soft, almost sympathetic, and resisted the urge to give away even a hint of what she knew that he didn't. He sat. "Now," he said briskly, "about your clients. These contracts, how did you obtain them? Personal connections?" "Work," she said. "Results." "Of course," he murmured, a paper cut of condescension. He picked up a sheet, then set it down. "You know, we pride ourselves on serving all communities," he said. "But we must be vigilant with certain risk profiles. I'm sure you understand." "I understand vigilance," Valerie said, her voice almost kind. She thought of her parents sitting in a bank 2 decades earlier, their Sunday-best clothes looking too formal for the fluorescent light, their smiles losing wattage as a loan officer slid their papers to the side. She remembered the ride home, the silence, the way her father hummed under his breath to fill the space. The door opened again. The older officer drew himself up as if expecting action. It was only a junior staffer in a blue blazer, cheeks flushed, whispering something to the manager from the doorway. Callahan excused himself for a minute, stepping out to the lobby where he greeted an older couple with both hands, ushering them toward a private office with a deference that bordered on theater. He laughed at something the man said, the laugh too big by a 1/4 inch. The guards shifted their weight, bored now. The younger officer pretended to examine the certification on the wall. Valerie looked at her watch, at the tiny notch she'd scratched on the inside when she graduated from law school, and breathed. She imagined the lobby beyond the glass and its choreography, the tellers stacking 20s in little fans, the receptionist's smile setting like plaster, Zara's hunched shoulders, the light on Peachtree Street going from bright to brighter. A machine somewhere pinged as if to announce a finished pot of coffee. The jazz track changed, an old tune Valerie's mother liked to hum when she kneaded biscuit dough. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She swallowed it down. Callahan came back in briskly, the smile gone this time. "All right," he said, as if speaking to a child about to touch a hot stove. "We're going to step outside for a moment, Ms. Hayes. Don't leave this room." He didn't wait for her reply. He didn't need to. He had built a room in which her consent didn't matter. He paused just long enough at the door to look back at the guards and then at the phone on the table, his gaze landing on her passport like he'd caught it moving on its own. He took out his own phone and, half turned away, lifted it to his ear. His voice went lower, confidential. "It's Robert," he said. "I think we've got a live one." He stepped into the hall, the door easing closed behind him, with the quiet surety of things that are used to going a certain way. In the glass, Valerie could see her own reflection sitting very still, listening to the hum of the fluorescent light and the soft click of panic somewhere deep in the building, like a distant metronome keeping time for a song that was about to change. From her seat in the small conference room, Valerie could see the reflection of 2 security guards in the glass wall, their postures set to watchful, arms folded across their chests. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was steady, but the air conditioner rattled in fits, like an old pickup refusing to turn over. The carpet had a faint chemical smell, fresh vacuum lines visible under her shoes. The space was designed to be neutral, forgettable, yet every choice here, position of the chairs, angle of the camera, was about control. She glanced at the table, a generic cherry laminate, smudged just enough to catch the light. Beside her bag lay her phone, screen dark, microphone ring still pointed toward Callahan's chair. He hadn't returned yet. Somewhere beyond the door, she heard the faint pop of a K-cup punctured in the break-room machine, then the tinny gurgle of coffee filling a paper cup. The door opened and Callahan stepped in, his jacket now unbuttoned as if to signal they were settling in for a chat. Thomas Pierce trailed behind him, holding the binder like it was evidence in a trial. "Ms. Hayes," Callahan began, sliding into the seat across from her, "I'd like to clarify a few things before Agent Wilson arrives." Valerie tilted her head, polite interest masking the flicker behind her eyes. "Of course. Clarity's important." He folded his hands on the table. "Your tax returns, yes, they show revenue. But how do we know those contracts you mentioned are legitimate? How did you secure these clients?" "Work," she said simply, "and results." Thomas cleared his throat, flipping a page without reading. "We've seen cases where certain businesses inflate numbers to look stronger on paper. Valerie didn't bite. "You've also seen businesses run by people like me outperform expectations year after year," she said, the calm in her tone like still water over a deep current. Callahan's smile didn't waver, but his voice cooled. "We just need to be extra thorough with certain types of applicants. Risk profiles, you understand." "Profiles?" Valerie repeated, letting the word rest between them like a stone dropped into a quiet pond. The door opened again. Zara Johnson stood there, a folder in her hands and a flicker of resolve on her face. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "I ran standard verification, check systems, early warning. Ms. Hayes's ID, business, and accounts all match. No flags, no discrepancies." For a moment, the air shifted. Callahan's jaw tightened. "Ms. Johnson," he said evenly, "you were not authorized to run those checks. Return to your station. We'll discuss your initiative later." Zara's gaze held Valerie's for half a second. A silent "I tried," before she turned and left. The door closed softly, but the weight of her intervention stayed in the room. Callahan leaned back. "Unfortunately, Ms. Hayes, a clean database entry isn't proof against fraud. We'll proceed with involving our federal liaison." He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and pressed the speaker button. The ringtone filled the room. "Agent Wilson?" "Yes, this is Robert Callahan, branch manager at Prestige National. We've got an uncooperative subject, possible ring involvement, requesting immediate response." As he spoke, Valerie glanced at the guards. The younger one shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between her and Callahan. The older guard's stance was unchanged, but his gaze lingered on Valerie's bar card lying on the table. When Callahan ended the call, he smiled with the satisfaction of someone who believed the narrative was his to write. "They'll be here shortly. We'll have this cleared up one way or another." Valerie checked her watch. The same small smile from earlier touched her lips. Barely there, but enough to make the younger guard tilt his head, curious. Outside the glass wall, the lobby moved in a slowed rhythm. Tellers lowered their voices. A customer peeked toward the conference room before quickly looking away. Zara, back at her station, counted bills with deliberate care, each motion precise. Valerie sat back in her chair, fingers loosely interlaced, and let the silence grow. Somewhere down the hall, a printer spat out page after page, the sound like a countdown only she understood. The glass doors at the front of the bank opened with a soft hiss, and conversation thinned the way sound does when a storm rolls over a lake. People turned. 4 figures in dark jackets moved in with calm purpose, the yellow letters on their backs impossible to miss. The guard near the ficus straightened. A woman in a floral dress clutched her deposit slip to her chest as if it were a passport. Robert Callahan was already halfway into a smile, the kind you put on for important guests. "Agents?" he called from the hall outside the conference room, his voice pitched to Carrie. "Over here. We've got your suspect contained." Valerie watched him through the glass, his hand cutting the air to indicate the direction, like a maitre d' gesturing toward a reserved table. The older security guard in the room shifted his stance, the younger swallowed, and the fluorescent hum felt louder for a beat. Valerie kept her hands folded on the table, her ring turned just so. The lead agent was tall and broad-shouldered, hair cut close, calm in a way that made other people breathe easier. Christopher Rivera took in the lobby with a single sweep, teller line, exits, cameras, then moved toward the conference room without breaking stride. 2 agents peeled left to the manager's office. Another drifted right, scanning the lobby as if he were nothing more than a customer deciding whether to open an account. Callahan stepped into their path, eager to narrate. "She's inside," he said, nodding toward the glass-walled room. "Attempted fraud, altered documents, uncooperative. We need to—" Rivera didn't slow. He gave Callahan a courteous, non-committal, "Thank you," the kind that acknowledged a person without crediting their story, and tapped the conference room door twice with his knuckles before opening it. The 2 guards inside reflexively straightened. The older officer from earlier, now standing in the hall, hovered like a punctuation mark that didn't belong in the sentence. "Ms. Hayes," Rivera said, voice low, steady, respectful in a way that carried. "Good afternoon." Valerie stood. The fluorescent light flattened everything, but couldn't touch the certainty in her face. She reached into her bag with measured movements and set a leather credential wallet on the table, flipping it open. The gold badge caught the light. The ID card was crisp beneath the plastic. "Special Agent Valerie Hayes," she said, the words clean and unhurried, meant for the room and the lobby beyond. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes and Civil Rights." It was as if the air took a step back. The younger guard's mouth opened, closed. The older guard blinked once, slowly, like a man surfacing from underwater. Outside the glass, a gasp traveled the way a ripple does, touching one person, then another. At the teller row, Zara's head snapped up. Her eyes landed on the badge and didn't move. Rivera straightened, his chin lifting by the smallest degree, and gave Valerie a crisp salute. "Special Agent Rivera," he said, "surveillance teams are in position. Digital forensics is staged. We're ready on your go." Callahan's face shifted through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, disbelief, a quick flare of anger, and then something that settled into indignation, the kind that grows in people who aren't used to being surprised. He stepped into the doorway, his smile gone. "This is highly irregular," he said, and it came out thinner than he meant. "You misrepresented yourself." Valerie didn't look at him first. She looked at the camera bubble in the corner of the ceiling, then at Rivera, then at the guards. When she did turn to Callahan, her voice was as even as ever, warm enough to pass in a church vestibule, firm enough to hold a room. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "you're a subject in a federal investigation into discriminatory lending practices at Prestige National. Everything that's happened today has been documented pursuant to that investigation." She reached to the chain around her neck and unclasped it, revealing what looked like a simple pendant. She set it on the table and pressed a tiny, recessed button. The pendant's face blinked once, and then played back clean audio, tinny but unmistakable in the small room. Callahan's voice, calm and managerial, from 20 minutes earlier. "We must be extra thorough with certain types of applicants, risk profiles, you understand." Oh. The words hung there, ugly in their mildness. The kind people think will save them because they sound like policy, the kind that never show up in training slides but end up embedded in practice. In the lobby, a murmur traveled. Someone raised a phone and then lowered it, unsure. The receptionist's smile had solidified into something that looked like regret. Thomas Pierce appeared at the end of the hall and froze when he saw what he had walked into. Rivera's team began to move without looking hurried. One agent spoke quietly with the older APD officer, who suddenly seemed to remember an obligation elsewhere. Another agent positioned himself near the teller counter with a relaxed posture and eyes that missed nothing. The fourth agent, a man in a polo shirt and jeans with a visitor lanyard still around his neck, Daniel Harper, drifted up from the lobby, peered in, and gave Valerie a small, knowing nod that read like punctuation. "We're here." Callahan tried to recover his footing. "This is entrapment," he said, louder now, for the benefit of anyone within earshot. "You created a situation." Valerie didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The operation was predicated on statistical disparities documented over a prolonged period, she said, and it came out like a line she'd say 1,000 times if that's what it took. "We didn't create the practices we're investigating. We recorded them." He laughed then, a short, disbelieving sound that exposed more than he intended. "You walked in here pretending to be a customer. I walked in here as a customer," she said, "and I was treated in a way consistent with how similarly qualified black applicants have been treated at this branch for months." Behind her, the pendant replayed the earlier phrase one more time on a loop until she clicked it off. "Certain types of applicants. Certain types of applicants." Zara, at the teller counter, couldn't help it. Her mouth curved in the smallest relief. She put a roll of quarters down, straightened the stack of 20s, and took a breath that reached her shoulders. "Agent Harper," Valerie said without turning. "Go ahead." Daniel Harper, undercover for weeks as a customer who never finished filling out a deposit slip, pulled a compact credential case from his back pocket and flipped it open to show a teller who'd watched him for days, then to a few customers who had started to gather. "FBI," he said with a small, reassuring smile, his voice pitched to carry calm. "We're conducting an investigation. Please continue your business as usual. Bank operations will remain open." "You can't just—" Callahan began. Rivera turned to him, polite, professional, solid as a doorframe. "We have a federal warrant, Mr. Callahan," he said. "We'll be imaging servers and securing records. You'll be given a copy." A new presence in the doorway drew everyone's attention. A woman in her 50s in a charcoal skirt suit, hair in a neat bob, a pearl at each ear. She wore authority like a tailored garment. "I'm Sharon Porter, Regional Vice President," she said, already smiling for the camera she sensed but could not yet see. "What seems to be the issue?" Valerie faced her with the courtesy of one professional to another and the firmness of someone who had done her homework. "Ms. Porter, we have evidence of disparate treatment and disparate impact in lending decisions across your branches," she said. "We'll be collecting systems data and interviewing staff." Sharon glanced, quick as a blink, at Callahan. "How bad is this?" Then recovered, easing her expression into concern. "We take compliance very seriously," she said. "If there have been isolated incidents—" "Patterns," Valerie said, "not incidents." Chris Rivera handed Sharon a copy of the warrant. She scanned it, looking for a seam to pry apart, and found none. She raised her eyes. "We'll cooperate, of course," she said, and you could hear the calculation in the grace. "Good," Valerie said. "Agent Rivera, begin the lock and image. Agent Harper, coordinate interviews with tellers and loan staff. Let customers finish their transactions." She turned to the two security guards who had watched this whole thing mutate from a routine humiliation into whatever this was becoming. "Gentlemen, your assistance keeping the lobby calm would be appreciated." They nodded, both relieved to be given something simple to do. Valerie stepped into the hall. Conversations had changed shape, quieter, intent. The receptionist's hand trembled a little as she reached for the phone to answer a call. The ceiling fan kept drifting, unfazed. The smell of coffee was stronger now, the pot having burned a little on the warmer. Thomas Pierce stood flat against the wall as if the paint could swallow him. When Valerie approached, he straightened too quickly. "Ma'am, We'll talk," she said, not unkindly. "With counsel present, if you prefer." He bobbed his head, grateful and terrified in equal measure. In the lobby, a man in a seersucker blazer had begun narrating events to his phone like the world needed his account. "I'm here at Prestige National," he whispered, louder than he realized. "The FBI is—" Zara leaned into her microphone. "Next customer, please," she said, voice steady, as if she'd been practicing for this exact Tuesday all her life. The line moved again, slow but not stalled. Valerie returned to the conference room where Callahan hovered like someone waiting for weather to change. She took her seat, the one that faced the door, and set her badge on the table where it gleamed like a small, inconvenient sun. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "for the record, I want to be clear about the sequence of events today." She listed them, not as a weapon, but as a scaffold. Appointment time ignored, escalation of requirements beyond policy, identity documents questioned without basis, coded language employed to justify differential treatment. "You're twisting this," he said, tight-jawed. "We're vigilant." "Selective vigilance," she said. "It's a choice. Your numbers confirm it." "Numbers can be made to say anything," he snapped. "Not when they're the bank's own," she said, and if there was any satisfaction in that, she kept it wrapped in professionalism. A soft knock at the door. Rivera stepped in with a slim laptop and set it on the table, angling the screen toward Valerie and by proxy toward anyone who wanted to see the inevitable. "First pull from the loan processing system," he said, preliminary but telling. Rows of applications filled the screen, names redacted for privacy, columns of scores and decisions. A column labeled Profile Adjustment showed tiny flags on certain zip codes. Overlaid charts marked approval rates by score bands. The gaps weren't subtle. Valerie didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She looked at Callahan and then at the camera bubble again, as if to spare him the need to perform for anyone but the truth. "Ms. Porter." Rivera's voice came from the hall. Sharon had drifted closer, drawn by the gravity a room like this acquires. "We'll need your IT administrator to grant us read-only access to the decisioning rules. We'll mirror the server. Your systems will remain online." Sharon nodded, already texting. "We'll get you what you need," she said. The older APD officer, now a little pink around the ears, reappeared in the doorway. He cleared his throat and addressed Rivera rather than Callahan, a small shift that felt larger than it looked. "We'll be on standby if needed," he said. "Doesn't look like you require our assistance." "Appreciate it," Rivera said, and the officer left in the slow, careful way of a man backing out of a room he wished he hadn't entered. Valerie rose and stepped to the glass. The lobby beyond was a study in suspended routine. A man in a ball cap counted out 20s at the counter, and then, realizing what he was doing, set them down to breathe. A woman with a stroller bounced her baby, eyes moving between the pacifier and the yellow letters on jackets. The receptionist answered, "Yes, we're open," again and again, and every time her voice steadied a little more. Through it all, Zara kept working, putting checks in the tray, sliding envelopes into the drop, exchanging small kindnesses that felt, in this moment, like acts of bravery. Valerie's phone buzzed. One short vibration. She glanced at the message. A simple, "Ready," from the digital forensics team, staged outside in an unmarked van. She typed back, "Go." A minute later, a rolling cart with a compact imaging rig appeared, pushed by a technician with the kind of calm that comes from having done this before and knowing the rules better than anyone else in the room. He nodded to Sharon, then to a nervous young IT specialist who had materialized from somewhere in the back, and began setting up the capture. Callahan watched, helpless and angry, as their systems were mirrored line by line. "This will cripple the branch," he said, looking for sympathy and finding none. "It won't," Rivera said. "We're imaging, not seizing." He pointed to the screen. "Your operations continue." "Your customers will panic," Callahan tried. Valerie looked at the lobby. "They seem remarkably composed," she said. "People handle the truth better than we give them credit for." Thomas Pierce, unable to bear the weight of the wall any longer, inched closer to the conference room and spoke from the threshold. "Ms. Hayes," he said, voice low, not for the room but for the tiny circle of air between them, "I want to cooperate. I have emails, notes from meetings, things he told us to say, things he told us not to write down that I wrote down anyway." Callahan whirled. "Thomas," he warned, and the word came out with more fear than heat. Valerie didn't move toward Thomas. She didn't need to. "There's a conference room across the hall," she said gently, as if inviting him to sit at a kitchen table. "An agent will take your statement. You'll have counsel if you wish." Thomas nodded once, like a man choosing a road. He disappeared down the hall with Daniel Harper at his shoulder. Sharon was still at the doorway, phone pressed to her ear now, voice low and careful. Whatever script she'd practiced for press calls and shareholder updates wouldn't help her in this particular moment. This wasn't the kind of story you could smooth with adjectives. Valerie sat again. She didn't lean on the table. She didn't grip the chair. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at Callahan, the way she looked at spreadsheets and case law, and people who taught themselves to believe that small cruelties were just business. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "we'll be conducting interviews this afternoon. You're free to have counsel present." He stared at the laptop screen as if he could will the graphs into different shapes. "I followed policy," he said, almost to himself. "You followed habits," Valerie said, soft enough that only he and the camera would hear. "Policies can be changed. Habits can be broken. Choices can be owned." In the lobby, the jazz station slid into an older tune, something with a friendly swing. The ceiling fan kept turning. The AC rattled and then quieted. Life, stubborn and ordinary, threaded itself through the scene. A boy of about 8, skinny, knobby-kneed, clutching a parent's hand, looked up at the yellow letters and whispered, "Is it safe?" His mother bent and said, "Yes, baby. It's just people doing their jobs." Valerie couldn't hear the words, but she could read the shape of them on the woman's mouth, and it settled something in her. Another agent stepped to the doorway then, a tablet in his hands, his expression a mixture of professionalism and the smallest hint of satisfaction that comes when work you've labored over quietly finally clicks into place. He spoke low to Rivera first, then looked to Valerie. She nodded for him to speak. He leaned in close enough that only the room would hear and said, "We've got enough to lock down the entire branch." The sound of keyboards clicking filled the bank as FBI agents set up a temporary command post right in the middle of the lobby. It was an odd sight. Rows of government-issued laptops on folding tables, power cords, snaking past velvet ropes that had been pushed aside. A portable scanner hummed as it fed page after page from thick loan files, the smell of toner mixed with the faint scent of whatever the bank's HVAC system pumped in to make the place smell like money. Valerie stood just inside the executive office, the glass door propped open so she could see both the lobby and the hallway leading to the back offices. She'd learned a long time ago that leadership in a field op wasn't about barking orders. It was about standing where everyone could see you, calm, centered, a fixed point in the churn. Zara Johnson was seated across from a young agent with a laptop, scrolling through screenshots on her phone. "I took these the day Mr. Callahan asked me to flag a file for extra review," Zara explained, her voice low but steady. The applicant had perfect credit. The only thing different was the zip code. "See? Same score, same debt-to-income ratio as the others I processed that week." The agent typed notes, eyes narrowing slightly as he compared the images. "You said he used a code word?" "Yes." Zara hesitated, then said it. "Profile B." It's not in any official manual, but we all knew what it meant. Across the lobby, Thomas Pierce sat at another table, a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hands, shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. He spoke to Daniel Harper, who nodded occasionally, asking just enough to keep the story moving. Every so often, Thomas's eyes darted toward the hallway, but each time he saw Callahan pacing inside his office under the watchful eye of an agent, he relaxed a little more. Valerie turned toward the IT corner they'd set up. A forensic tech with bright green sneakers was deep into the bank's decisioning software, her fingers flying over the keyboard. 2 large monitors glowed with lines of code and flowcharts. She called out without looking up. "Found something. Rule set flagged by zip code. It's not labeled as race, but..." She tapped a few keys, and a map appeared on the screen, certain neighborhoods shaded in red. "Let me guess," Valerie said, walking over. "Those are majority black census tracts." "Bingo," the tech said. "The algorithm auto-adds between 15 and 40 points to the applicant's internal risk score if the property or mailing address is in one of these zones. It pushes borderline approvals into denials." Chris Rivera joined them, leaning in to study the map. "That's not just bias," he said. "That's baked-in discrimination. Someone had to program it." "Or approve it," Valerie added. Sharon Porter, the regional VP, had been hovering near the coffee station, alternating between checking her phone and making small talk with the few customers who insisted on finishing their business. She approached now, her heels clicking softly on the tile. "Agent Hayes, I hope you understand this is not sanctioned by corporate policy. If there's a rogue programmer..." "This isn't rogue," Valerie said, keeping her tone professional. "It's systemic, and it's not just this branch. We'll be checking your other locations." Sharon's jaw tightened. "I'll need to notify our general counsel." "You'll have time," Valerie said. "Right now, I need the names of everyone with admin access to this software." In the back hallway, 2 agents were photographing framed awards and compliance certificates on the walls, anything that might later be useful in showing the contrast between image and reality. One paused at a poster about serving all communities equally and took a close-up. By mid-afternoon, the command post had a rhythm. Agents interviewing staff, techs imaging drives, clerks boxing up paper files. Valerie moved from table to table, asking short, precise questions, letting her team do their jobs. At one point, she found Zara alone, sipping water from a paper cup. "You're doing the right thing," Valerie said quietly. Zara gave a quick, humorless laugh. "Feels like I'm lighting a match in my own living room." "Sometimes that's the only way to burn out the mold," Valerie said. A shout from the IT table drew them back. The tech had pulled up a user log. Got a name on the change that added the zip code flag. User ID matches. Thomas Pierce. Valerie glanced toward Thomas, who froze when he saw the screen. He set down his coffee, palms flat on the table. Look, I didn't write it," he said quickly. "Callahan told me exactly what to input. He said it was just a temporary adjustment for market stability." "Then you'll put that in a sworn statement," Rivera said, already pulling a form from his folder. Through it all, Callahan kept pacing his office like a caged animal, occasionally stopping to glare at the activity in the lobby. When an agent stepped in to collect his phone and tablet for imaging, he protested loudly enough for customers to hear. Sharon Porter stepped in then, murmuring something meant to calm him, but the tension radiating off him was impossible to miss. By late afternoon, the tech team had a full copy of the bank's loan decision database, complete with embedded rules and historical logs. They'd already spotted patterns reaching back 5 years. Valerie and Rivera stood together near the front doors, reviewing a printout of preliminary stats. Approval rates for applicants with identical credit profiles, split by race. The disparities were glaring. Rivera tapped the last page. "Valerie, this pattern isn't just here. It's statewide." The wood-paneled courtroom of the Richard B. Russell Federal Building had a stillness that felt older than the building itself. Heavy blinds filtered the late-morning Georgia sun into long stripes across the gallery. The hum of the air vents was low, steady, and the smell of old paper and polished oak mixed with the faint tang of fresh coffee from the hallway. Valerie sat at the government's table, her suit as precise as her notes. To her left, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Reeves flipped through the trial binder one last time, the tabs in neat rainbow order. Across the aisle, Robert Callahan sat rigid in a charcoal suit, his tie knotted a little too tightly. Sharon Porter beside him with a legal team that looked like they'd been chosen to project calm inevitability. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, filed in, some glancing toward the parties, others looking straight ahead as they took their seats. Judge Carolyn Matthews entered, her black robe swaying slightly, expression neutral. "Be seated," she said, her voice carrying without strain. "Counsel, you may proceed." Reeves rose. "The United States will show," he began, "that Prestige National Bank engaged in a systematic pattern of discriminatory lending, denying qualified black applicants at rates far higher than similarly qualified white applicants. We will prove this through statistical analysis, internal documents, and the testimony of those who carried out and those who resisted these unlawful practices." As he spoke, Valerie scanned the jury, noting who leaned forward, who scribbled notes. She'd learned to read these tells. The woman in seat 3, pen poised but unmoving. The man in seat 9, jaw tight when certain phrases landed. The defense attorney, a silver-haired man named Whitaker, opened with a different rhythm. "This case is about policy, not prejudice," he said smoothly. "The bank applied neutral criteria to assess risk. Any disparities are unfortunate byproducts of market realities, not intentional discrimination." The first witness was Zara Johnson. She walked to the stand with her back straight, but Valerie caught the small exhale she gave before sitting. After being sworn in, she answered Reeves's questions with steady clarity. She described Profile B, the unwritten code, the way files from certain zip codes were routed for extra scrutiny. Reeves laid foundation, then asked, "Ms. Johnson, can you tell the jury what happened when you questioned this practice?" Zara's eyes flicked briefly toward Callahan before returning to the jury. "I was told to follow instructions, that it was above my pay grade, and that if I wanted to keep my job, I should stop asking questions." Whitaker rose for cross-examination, trying for a conversational tone. "Ms. Johnson, you never saw anyone mark a file with the words, 'black applicant,' correct?" "No," Zara said. "And you agree that credit score is a legitimate factor in lending?" "Yes." "And income-to-debt ratio?" "Yes." Whitaker smiled faintly. "So if those were the only factors considered, there would be nothing improper." "That's right," Zara said. Then she leaned forward slightly. "But those weren't the only factors considered." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Whitaker's smile tightened. "No further questions." Thomas Pierce testified next, visibly nervous, his hands twisting in his lap until Reeves placed a copy of the email in front of him. "Mr. Pierce, is this the message Mr. Callahan sent you on March 8th instructing you to modify the lending algorithm?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, he told me to add the zip code flag, said it was just a temporary stability measure." "Did he explain why those zip codes?" Thomas swallowed. "He said they were high risk, but we both knew what that meant." Whitaker tried to rattle him on cross, suggesting Thomas was shifting blame to save himself. But when Reeves redirected and had Thomas read the line from Callahan's follow-up, "Make sure this stays off the record," the jury's eyes sharpened. Mid-afternoon, the government introduced the statistical charts Valerie's team had prepared. Side-by-side approval rates, identical financial profiles, the only difference being race. Each chart was simple, stark. Then came the keystone. Reeves called Valerie to the stand. She took the oath and sat, her hands steady on the wooden rail. Reeves began with her background, years in financial crimes, experience in undercover operations. Then he moved to the day at the branch. "Agent Hayes, did you have a legitimate business reason for your visit to Prestige National on July 14th? "Yes," she said. "I presented an application supported by complete documentation and a credit score of 820. "And how were you treated compared to white applicants you observed?" "Differently. I was subjected to additional document requests outside policy, my identity was questioned, and coded language was used to justify the treatment." Reeves walked her through the pendant recorder, the playback of Callahan's words. The courtroom was silent except for the tinny echo of certain types of applicants, risk profiles. Whitaker's cross was pointed but careful. "Agent Hayes, you're a skilled investigator. Isn't it true you intended to provoke a response?" "I intended to present myself as a qualified applicant and document the response I received," she said. "And you're aware that correlation doesn't equal causation?" "Yes," she said. "And I'm also aware when causation is sitting in front of me wearing a suit." A few jurors smiled despite themselves. Judge Matthews rapped her gavel lightly. "Let's keep to questions and answers." By the time both sides rested, the courtroom felt heavier. Closing arguments the next morning were crisp. Reeves framed it as a choice, equal treatment or systemic bias. Whitaker warned against punishing a bank for being careful. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreperson's voice was clear. "We find the defendant, Prestige National Bank, liable for discriminatory lending practices under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and the Fair Housing Act." Callahan's jaw clenched. Sharon Porter's gaze dropped to the table. Zara closed her eyes for one long breath. Judge Matthews ordered injunctive relief, a compliance monitor, and substantial monetary penalties to fund community lending initiatives. "Discrimination, whether overt or disguised in algorithms," she said, "has no place in our financial system." Valerie sat back, feeling the weight shift. Not gone, never gone, but shifted. As the courtroom emptied, a reporter called out, "Agent Hayes, is this the end of the investigation?" Valerie paused at the door. "It's the end of one chapter," she said, "and the start of another." She stepped into the marble hallway, the sound of her heels echoing, already thinking about the next branch, the next pattern to uncover. 3 months after the verdict, The branch on Peachtree Street looked the same from the outside. Same glass walls, same brass letters spelling Prestige National Bank. But inside, the air felt different. Customers no longer lingered at the door, deciding if they belonged. A new manager sat at the corner office desk, a black woman in her 40s named Angela Ross. Her first act had been to remove the appointments-only brass stand and replace it with a wide wooden table holding coffee, water, and a stack of forms labeled in plain English. She greeted customers by name when she knew it, and "Good morning, sir," or "ma'am," when she didn't. Zara Johnson still worked the teller row, but she stood straighter now. The tight smile she'd worn for years was gone, replaced with one that came easier. She wore a small pin shaped like a scale, balance, justice, that a local nonprofit had given her for speaking at a financial literacy workshop. The compliance monitor appointed by the court visited twice a week. He was polite but thorough, reviewing loan files at a folding table in the break room. The new decisioning software had no hidden zip code flags. Every criterion was documented and transparent. Applicants could request a copy of their own scoring breakdown. Thomas Pierce had left the bank. Word was he was working remotely for a credit union in North Carolina that specialized in small business lending to underserved areas. Before he left, he testified again, this time in an internal HR hearing that resulted in 2 mid-level executives resigning. Robert Callahan's office was empty, the blinds open. His name had been removed from the frosted glass, replaced by nothing yet, a small square of unfaded carpet marked where his chair had been. On a Thursday morning, Valerie Hayes walked through the lobby, not as a customer, not undercover, but as herself. She wore jeans, a soft blazer, and a badge clipped to her belt. Angela Ross met her halfway, offering a handshake that turned into a 2-handed clasp. "Agent Hayes," Angela said, "you're becoming a regular." "Just checking in," Valerie said. She looked around the room. The ceiling fan still made its slow circles, but the space under it felt warmer. "How's business?" "Better than I expected," Angela said. "Word's gotten around. People who stopped banking here years ago are coming back. Had a woman yesterday tell me she brought her grandson to open his first account because she finally trusts us." Zara waved from behind the counter, sliding a roll of quarters to a customer and laughing at something he said. Valerie caught her eye and tipped her chin in greeting. Zara's smile widened. The bank now hosted monthly workshops on credit building, small business planning, and home ownership. Flyers in English and Spanish sat by the door. On Saturdays, a local caterer set up a table with pastries, and kids colored at a corner table while their parents talked to loan officers. The changes weren't just cosmetic. Approval rates for qualified black applicants had climbed to match those of white applicants. The monitor's reports showed 0 unexplained variances in the last 2 months. Still, Valerie knew how fragile progress could be. Systems could slide backward when attention drifted. Outside the branch, Peachtree Street shimmered in the autumn sun. Food trucks lined the curb, and a jazz trio played under a striped canopy. A few blocks away, the storefront that had been empty for years now housed a community legal aid clinic, funded in part by the penalties from the Prestige case. Valerie crossed the street and paused to watch a group of teenagers arguing over the best way to set up a pop-up shop for their handmade T-shirts. One of them held a folder of loan application forms from the bank. They looked at her badge and, instead of going quiet, kept talking. That small act, the absence of fear, was the real measure of change. Her phone buzzed. A message from Chris Rivera. "Pulling loan data from another bank. Patterns look familiar. Call you in an hour." Valerie smiled faintly. She took one last look at the bank, the customers moving in and out without hesitation, and started walking toward her car. In her rearview mirror, the glass walls of Prestige National caught the light, reflecting the street, the people, the sky. A surface that once hid the truth now showed everything outside, clear as day. And somewhere else, behind other glass walls in another city, someone was making decisions that would soon have to answer to the same light. There's a certain quiet that settles over a place when wrongs have been set right. Not the loud celebration of a parade, but the gentler rhythm of life resuming without fear. In the months after the case, you could feel it in the way customers lingered at the counter to chat, or how the front doors stayed open a little longer on sunny afternoons. What once was a bank wrapped in suspicion now felt more like a porch light left on for everyone. The Black community in that part of town began to return, not just for the loans and accounts they had been denied before, but for the trust they thought was gone for good. This story, from the first uneasy meeting in a glass-walled office to the day the courtroom fell silent for the verdict, was never just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about dignity, the quiet kind that doesn't shout but stands steady, even when the floor feels unsteady beneath you. Valerie's calm persistence, Zara's choice to speak, Thomas's decision to tell the truth, all of it wove together into a reminder that keeping your head high is not just self-respect. It's an act of service to the next person who will walk through that same door. For the Black community, these acts meant more than winning a case. They meant reclaiming a place at the table. The heart of it is simple. Hold on to your dignity and stand for the truth with the same patience you'd want if the roles were reversed. That's how you not only win justice, but build something better from the hurt. Life has a way of testing our steadiness, of asking if we'll bend to what's easy or stay true to what's right. And sometimes, like a lantern left quietly in a window, a single act of kindness or courage can guide us through the darkest streets we've ever known. So maybe this isn't only about one bank, one set of policies, or one verdict. Maybe it's about how we choose to see each other in the everyday moments. The line at the post office, the table next to ours at the diner, the neighbor whose story we think we already know. If this tale lingers with you, let it be in the way you catch yourself before making a judgment, and in the way you leave room for the unexpected grace of being wrong. Take a moment, if you can, to think about the spaces you're part of, your church group, your favorite coffee shop, your own living room, and how they welcome or close their doors to others. If this story touched your heart, consider passing along its warmth to someone who might need it today, because in the end, it's not the verdict alone that changes the world. It's the way we carry that light forward, one open door at a time.